Welcome to Night Stories from the VHS era, where the past isn't just remembered, it's relived, one dusty summer memory at a time. Stretch your arms toward the ceiling fan, humming lazily above, and know deep in your chest that you had absolutely nothing planned for the day. Do you remember the thrill of putting on your shoes without even thinking about where they would take you? Have you ever left the house with nothing but a half-eaten piece of toast in your hand, your backpack forgotten by the door, and your heart full of adventure? How it felt, you'll remember what it meant to be free. This is how it always began. The 90s were good at letting you disappear after breakfast. There were no phones in our pockets, no GPS tracking our moves, no apps telling us what to do. My mom would yell something from the kitchen, like, "Be back before dinner." As I stepped out the door, that was all. No questions, no check-ins, just the creaky sound of the screen door snapping behind me and the warm promise of a day that belonged entirely to us. I can still feel the heat rising from the driveway, the scent of toast and margarine clinging to my fingers as I jumped down the steps. I didn't have a plan. None of us did. But that was the beauty of it. There was no pressure to know what would come next. My old Huffy bike leaned against the mailbox, waiting like a trusty dog. Its handlebar grips were peeling. One of the pedals squeaked, and the red paint was chipped in places, but it was mine, and it was fast enough to make the wind whistle in my ears as I tore down the road. That morning, like many others, I met up with Tyler and Wes by the oak tree at the end of the street. Tyler had his dad's old Walkman clipped to his shorts, playing a cassette with half the label peeled off. I think it was Green Day, or maybe The Offspring. Wes had brought 2 cans of Surge from his basement stash, already warm from being carried in his backpack. We sat there in the dappled shade, sipping neon green soda at 9:30 in the morning, like kings who made their own rules. No one asked what we were going to do. We didn't need to. Wanna head to the lot behind the school? Someone would eventually say, and we'd all nod. We pedaled past mailboxes and faded basketball hoops, past houses with wind chimes dancing in the morning breeze, past sprinklers hissing in front yards where no one was out yet. Our town felt like it was ours alone in those hours, quiet, stretching, waiting, due. You remember how light your body felt back then? How your mind was only ever half aware of time, as if it didn't really exist during summer. We'd race each other on the cracked sidewalks, screaming about who cheated and who didn't. We'd stop to poke at ants, or dare each other to jump curbs or ride without hands. The days moved slow, deliciously slow, but our energy was endless. That was the magic, wasn't it? Eventually, we'd end up wherever the wind pushed us. Some days, it was the vacant lot where the grass grew tall and the mud dried in cracked tiles under the sun. Other days, we found ourselves by the creek, skipping stones and pretending we were explorers searching for treasure. We'd use sticks as swords, fight imaginary monsters, or try to catch grasshoppers in our palms. I always liked the creek best. It smelled like damp earth and wild mint. And when we took off our shoes and let our feet sink into the cool mud, the world felt brand new again. We'd spend hours there, arguing about whether frogs could survive in soda, or trying to balance across the fallen log without slipping into the water. And when we did fall, when someone landed butt first in the muddy bank or scraped a knee on a sharp rock, we'd laugh until our ribs hurt. No one cried. No one ran home. We were too busy living. Do you remember the first time you realized you were dirty in the best possible way? I do. That first feeling of exhaustion where you knew you'd given the day everything, and the day had given you something back, something unspoken, something wild. You didn't need a souvenir or a photo. Your dirt-smudged face and tangled hair were proof enough that it had been a good day. We didn't have phones to post pictures or text each other. There was this strange telepathy between us kids, like we knew when to meet, where to gather. Maybe it was the sound of tires on gravel, or a distant laugh echoing from a few blocks away, or just instinct. I don't know. That it was almost time to head home, so we rode back. The streets were still warm, and the cicadas were starting to sing louder. Our legs were tired, but our hearts felt full, the kind of full that doesn't need explaining. I remember pedaling slower on the way back, dragging it out, taking in every detail. The rustle of tree branches, the smell of barbecue drifting from a backyard, the way my tires left trails on the dusty sidewalk, and then home again. My mom would be standing by the kitchen window, arms crossed but smiling, pretending to scold me for the state I was in. Dirt on my elbows, socks mismatched, hair damp with sweat. I'd shrug and grin, too tired to explain everything. I think she knew. I think she remembered what it was like to dot, because, really, was there anything better than coming home covered in dirt, happy and exhausted? So, to all the questions I asked you at the beginning, yes, I remember. I remember it all. I remember the taste of freedom before lunchtime. I remember the joy of doing nothing, and how it somehow became everything. I remember the noise of bike chains and the feel of the wind in my ears, the laughter echoing down empty lots, and the quiet walk back at dusk. And if you remember too, even just a little, then you're already home again. The thing about summer days in the 90s was that they didn't have chapters. Not really. They just spilled from one moment into the next, like the melting ice of a freezer pop dripping down your wrist. You'd think you were on your way home, just coasting down the sidewalk with the sun sinking low and the streetlights waiting to blink awake. And then something would catch your eye, a gap in a fence you hadn't noticed before, a rustling in the grass that made you think maybe, just maybe, it was something worth finding. And suddenly, the day wasn't over. It was just beginning again. That evening, instead of heading straight home, we veered left at the corner where Mr. Baker's fence had finally started to lean. Tyler was the first to push through it, the way he always was, slipping between two warped planks like it had been designed for us. We didn't need to say anything. Our bikes hit the grass, and we left them in a heap near the mulberry tree, the one with purple stains all around the roots. Our legs moved before our thoughts caught up. The lot beyond the fence had been empty for as long as we could remember. It wasn't technically someone's yard, but it wasn't really public either. Just that weird, in-between kind of place, which, honestly, made it perfect. The air smelled sweet, like sun-warmed grass and dust, and the ground sloped downward into a hollow where the weeds grew tall and tangled. We didn't hesitate. We pushed forward, boots crunching on twigs, bare legs brushing against the itchy leaves of plants we never bothered to name. Our arms were out in front of us, shielding our faces from the sharper branches, and our voices dropped to whispers. even though no one was around to hear us. It felt like stepping into another world. Do you remember that feeling? That sense that you had stumbled upon something hidden, something no grown-up even knew existed. When the tall grass whispered secrets as you moved through it, when the world shrank to the sound of your breath and the beat of your heart. Tyler pointed to the big tree near the far side of the clearing. It was crooked, like it had grown in the wind and then got stuck that way. Its branches dipped low and twisted like arms, and it didn't take much for Wes to get his foot on the first one. I followed right after, finding footholds in the knots and notches, gripping the rough bark with my fingers. The climb was slow at first, careful, but then we got higher, and the higher we got, the faster we moved. We didn't think about falling. We didn't think about anything but the thrill of getting just one branch higher than the last time. From the top, the neighborhood looked different, smaller, softer, like something from a picture book. The rooftops glowed orange with the sunset, and the streets curved gently around the houses, like rivers made of asphalt. The air was still and golden. Tyler stretched his arms out wide and let the breeze run over him. He looked like a scarecrow, balanced and proud, and we all laughed when a bird suddenly darted out of the leaves above his head and nearly made him fall. He caught himself, gripping the trunk, and then laughed even harder. There was something about being up in that tree that made us feel invincible. The world was big, sure, but we had found our own corner of it, and it belonged to us. Up there, we were kings, explorers, pirates, astronauts, whatever we wanted to be. There were no warnings, no signs telling us to stave off, no adult voices reminding us to be careful. It was just us and the rustling of leaves and the creak of the branches swaying gently beneath our weight. Eventually, we climbed back down, sweaty and grinning, our hands sticky with sap and dirt under our nails. But we weren't done, not even close. Back on the ground, we followed a narrow trail worn into the weeds, one that curved behind the old school and past the edge of someone's forgotten garden. We had to jump a low wire fence, one of those flimsy ones with loops at the top, and I remember catching my shoelace on it and falling face first into the clover on the other side. Everyone laughed. I did too. That kind of fall didn't hurt, not back then. Not when you were surrounded by friends and the world was one big playground. We kept moving, crawling through a tunnel of tall grass that formed naturally over the years, bent by wind and time, and maybe kids just like us. It was one of those places where you had to get on your belly to get through, pushing forward with your elbows, leaves brushing against your cheeks, the scent of earth and bugs and something wild filling your nose. It should have felt scary, but it didn't. It felt right, like a secret passage to somewhere important. Do you remember the sound your clothes made when you crawled through the grass like that? That dry, crinkly hiss of fabric against stalks? The occasional snap of a twig? The faint squeak of your sneakers dragging behind you? We emerged into another clearing, one none of us had seen before. It had a rusted swing set with only one swing left hanging, the chains groaning when Wes tried to sit on it. There were tire tracks in the dirt, but no sign of anyone around. We spent some time poking through what had been left behind: a broken lawn chair, a yellow plastic bucket, a water gun with no trigger. Treasures, absolute treasures. Tyler claimed the bucket. Wes took the chair's aluminum frame and called it a shield, and I tucked the water gun into my waistband like a holster. even though it couldn't shoot. We played until the sky faded from gold to lavender. We invented a game where the grass was lava and the swing was the only safe spot, and we took turns trying to push each other into the danger zone. We yelled, we rolled, we fought with words and sticks, and then forgave each other in seconds. There was no time to hold grudges. The sun was going down. We had to squeeze every drop out of what was left. On the way back, we took the long route. We climbed fences again, not because we had to, but because we could. One backyard had a clothesline, strung between two posts with faded beach towels swaying like flags. Another had a kiddie pool with a half-deflated float still bobbing in the water. We moved silently, careful not to disturb the spell of the evening. By the time I reached my front steps, I was scratched up, dirt-covered, and aching in the best way. My hair was full of leaves, and my socks didn't match anymore. One of them had a hole the size of a quarter at the heel. My mom looked at me from the kitchen again. She had that same look, the one that said, "What have you been up to?" But also, "I'm glad you're home." And even now, all these years later, I think about that day, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was just ours. The neighborhood was a living map of possibilities. We weren't limited by plans or warnings. We weren't told to slow down, to be careful, to think twice. We just were. Wild, messy, curious, fearless. Wasn't that the best kind of freedom? I don't think any of us ever really planned to end up at the construction site. It just called to us. You know the kind I mean. The lots where new houses were going up. Half-framed skeletons of what would soon become someone else's life. To us, they looked like castles being born. Places with no rules yet. Just piles of dirt, slabs of cement, planks of wood stacked like a game of Jenga, and the smell of fresh sawdust hanging thick in the air. If you grew up in the 90s, I bet you know exactly what I'm talking about. We found one that summer afternoon by accident, when Tyler's bike chain popped off near the cul-de-sac at the far end of Maple Drive. While he knelt down to fix it, Wes pointed past the chain-link fence, where a hill of reddish dirt rose up like a miniature mountain just behind the first framed house. The site wasn't big, just a couple of lots cleared side by side, but the machines were quiet and the workers were gone for the day. That meant one thing: it was ours. The hill wasn't even that tall, maybe 6 or 7 feet from base to peak, but it was steep, uneven, and made entirely of dry, crumbling soil that stuck to your hands and filled your shoes. The moment I saw it, I felt that familiar charge, that buzz of possibility. We dropped our bikes without thinking and darted through a tear in the fence someone else had already made. As soon as my foot hit the base of the hill, I was already laughing. Climbing up wasn't the hard part. It was the sliding down that made you scream with joy. We'd crouch low, plant our hands behind us, and push off with a whoop, the dirt flying up around us in clouds as we rocketed to the bottom. It got in our shirts, our socks, our teeth. We didn't care. The faster we went, the harder we laughed. Tyler tried going down, standing once, like a snowboarder, but wiped out halfway and landed flat on his back, arms flailing. It left a dirt print of his whole body like a fossil at the bottom of the hill. He called it the Tylerosaurus and claimed it would be studied by future generations. Do you remember how nothing felt too dirty back then? How mud and dust weren't something to be avoided, but proof that the day had been good. We didn't worry about the mess. We welcomed it. Our white socks turned brown. Our knees scraped raw. But every mark was a memory. Once we had conquered the hill, we turned our attention to the unfinished house behind it. The frame was up, and stacks of drywall leaned against one wall, waiting for tomorrow's work crew. But to us, it was a fort, a stronghold, a secret base. The ground floor was nothing but exposed beams and scattered tools. Sunlight filtered through the open spaces where windows would eventually go, casting long, dusty shadows on the plywood floor. Every sound echoed: footsteps, whispers, the occasional creak of settling wood, as if the place was alive. Wes found an old paint can and a stick and started tapping out a rhythm, claiming it was our explorer anthem. Tyler opened his backpack and produced the melted remains of a Reese's and a half-crushed bag of Doritos, which instantly became our official expedition supplies. I found a scrap of blue chalk and used it to draw a map on the floor. Out the territories of our new kingdom: Dirt Hill, Shadow Corner, Window Edge, and the Forbidden Ladder. Ah yes, the ladder. It was one of those tall aluminum things, left leaning against an unfinished wall. At the top, an open beam led to what would eventually be the second floor. It was roped off with a bit of caution tape, the fluttering end caught in a breeze. Of course, we ignored it. "Who's going up?" Tyler asked, his eyes already daring. "Volunteered." Maybe it was the adrenaline still running through my veins from the hill. Or maybe it was just the way the dust swirled like smoke around the ladder's base, making it seem like the start of something big. I climbed slowly, the metal warm against my palms, every step groaning slightly under my weight. At the top, I reached out and hoisted myself up onto the beam, crouching low. The view was something else. From up there, the whole neighborhood felt unreal, like a toy model. You could see over rooftops, down into backyards, and far into the tree line beyond the creek. I spotted the top of our old oak tree, the edge of the empty lot, even the crooked mailbox near Tyler's house. It was like seeing our world from a God's eye view. And for a moment, I didn't move. I just watched. I just felt, eventually. I climbed back down, and we spent the rest of the afternoon weaving through the site, turning each half-built frame into part of our story. That's what kids did back then. We made stories right there in the dirt. We weren't just messing around, we were on quests. In that hour, we were treasure hunters, searching for lost relics beneath the piles of wood. We were fugitives, hiding from the imaginary guards patrolling the scaffolding. We were time travelers in a forgotten era of bricks, mud, and sawdust. Of course, we got caught eventually, not by adults, but by time itself. The sun dipped lower, and the shadows grew long. Our stomachs rumbled, our legs ached, and someone finally said it was probably time to go. We retraced our steps, each of us, heavier now, not just from the dirt caked to our jeans, but from everything the day had given us. We were covered in it, inside and out. I remember looking down at my shoes and realizing I couldn't even see them anymore. Just two brown, mud-caked lumps where sneakers used to be. I didn't care. I smiled wider than I had all week. We walked our bikes home instead of riding, too tired to care. Our voices lower now, softer. Not because we were sad, but because we were content. Do you remember what that kind of exhaustion felt like? The kind where your bones buzzed from the effort, where every blink felt slow, and your arms hung loose at your sides. But inside, you felt alive, joyful, as if you'd really done something important that day, even if you couldn't explain what. I finally got home. My mom didn't even ask what happened. She just looked at me, shook her head, and told me to strip out of my clothes on the porch before coming in. I left a trail of dirt across the welcome mat and fell asleep that night, without even brushing my teeth. I didn't need dreams. I had lived enough of one that day. The morning after our adventure at the construction site, I woke up with dried dirt still caked beneath my fingernails and a faint scrape on my elbow I didn't remember getting. My body ached in that beautiful way it did every summer, a kind of soreness that told you the day before had been real, that the fun hadn't been imagined. The sun was already high, pouring golden light through the blinds, and I could hear the hum of a lawnmower a few blocks away. That familiar summer soundtrack, dogs barking, birds chirping, and someone yelling from a porch, reminded me that another day was waiting. We met at Wes's house this time. His mom was already out front, watering the flower beds, her radio playing soft rock from a portable speaker she balanced on the porch rail. When she saw us walking up, she waved and raised the hose like a sword. Before we could blink, a stream of icy water came hissing through the air and hit Tyler square in the chest. He yelped and darted behind the mailbox, laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. "Good morning, boys," she said with a grin. Wes tried to run, but slipped on the wet grass and landed flat. The three of us shrieked, not from fear or anger, but that uncontrollable kind of joy that bubbles up when you're caught off guard in the best way. You remember how good cold water felt on sunburned skin, how it shocked you first, then healed something deep you didn't even know needed healing. From that moment on, the day became a game of staying dry in all the wrong places. We grabbed our bikes and headed toward the neighborhood's southern end, where the sprinklers always ran long and the yards were big enough to weave through without getting yelled at. None of us wore helmets. Our shirts were still dripping, stuck to our backs, and the pavement steamed under our wheels. We didn't ride in a straight line. We zigzagged, looped, raced, and circled back. Whenever we heard the click-click of a sprinkler starting up, we'd hit the brakes and either prepare to dodge or aim for it, depending on how brave we felt. The big rotary ones were the most fun. They spun slow enough that you could time your sprint, daring each other to run through the arching jet without getting hit. Of course, we always got hit. That was the point. Double quotes, 3.2.1, go. Wes would yell, and I'd take off barefoot across the lawn, arms pumping, heart pounding. Just as I thought I'd made it, a spray of water would catch me right across the face. I'd stumble, cough, and laugh all at once. Somewhere behind me, Tyler was already rolling in the grass, and we'd play chicken, seeing who could get the closest before the stream smacked you in the shins. Like summer had its own flavor back then. Getting wet wasn't a problem, it was the goal. There were no clean clothes waiting in a gym bag, no towels over our shoulders, just sunlight, warm breezes, and the knowledge that if you stayed wet long enough, the sun would dry you off by lunchtime. It always did, and the sidewalk became a battlefield. When someone grabbed a hose from their yard, the chase was on. I remember the sound of the nozzle twisting open, the sharp hiss of pressure, the sudden burst of water, spraying like a fire hose. We'd scatter, screaming and laughing, slipping on wet concrete and diving behind hedges. Tyler once hid behind a trash can only for Wes to tip it accidentally and send the entire thing rolling into the street. We laughed so hard that I nearly threw up. Our stomachs hurt from it, but we didn't stop. We never wanted to stop. Sometimes the neighbors joined in. Mr. Delaney would pretend to scold us, then turn on his own sprinkler just to lure us back. Mrs. Chan, who always had the best garden on the block, once let us run through the mist from her hose while she watered the roses. "You're crazier than my grandkids," she said with a smile, then sprayed Tyler right in the butt when he bent over to tie his shoe. We howled. Do you remember how kind adults were when they weren't trying to supervise you? When they let you be wild, messy, ridiculous, and sometimes even encouraged it? As the afternoon stretched on, our clothes grew heavy again, not just from water, but from everything we were collecting. Bits of grass stuck to our socks, tiny cuts on our knees from slipping, drops of blue Kool-Aid from a neighbor's porch. Each mark told a story, and the sun, relentless and proud, watched from above, turning every puddle into a mirror, every shadow into a temporary shelter. At one point, Wes brought out a slip and slide, the old yellow kind with the red crash bumper at the end, and stretched it across the slightly sloped lawn behind his house. We took turns sprinting belly flopping onto it with all our strength, sliding down the plastic with screams that echoed through the block. The water sprayed from both sides, forming a slick path that launched us into the grass. We just kept going, over and over again, as if each slide might be better than the last, and maybe it was. Eventually, the hose ran cold. Our energy followed. We lay in the damp grass, bodies buzzing, eyes squinting at the orange sky. I remember looking over at my friends, their cheeks red, their shirts twisted, their hands behind their heads, and thinking that nothing in the world could be better than this. Not Disneyland, not video games, not even a whole day at the pool, because what we had was real. It wasn't planned, it wasn't scheduled, it just was. A day of water fights, sidewalk sprints, and laughter that left us breathless. A day when the world said yes to every silly idea we had. A day where no one told us to dry off, come inside, or calm down. Do you remember how important those days felt, even if they were simple? When I finally went home, my skin felt tight from the sun and water. Head and said, "Smells like summer out there." She was right. We weren't supposed to go back to the creek. Not after the last time, when Tyler nearly split his chin trying to leap over the wide part, and Wes lost one of his Reeboks in the mud. But that's the thing about forbidden places in childhood. The more you're told to stay away, the more it whispers your name. And that morning, as the sky shifted between pale blue and lazy gray, with the kind of breeze that carried mischief, the creek called to us again. We didn't head straight there. Like kings returning to a throne, the sun peeked in and out of the clouds, and the air smelled thick, like it had rained just enough the night before to soften everything. You could see it to puddles lingering in the dips of sidewalks, droplets clinging to mailbox flags, and trails of mud stretching from the gutters down into the street drains. It offered them. When we reached the clearing behind the school, the one we called No Man's Land, where our old tire swing still hung by a fraying rope. The path that led down to the creek had grown more wild since spring, brambles thicker, vines reaching out like fingers, but we knew it. We had cleared this trail ourselves, summer after summer, with sticks and stubbornness. And as we pushed through it again, the same giddy energy built in my chest, like returning to a childhood shrine. Do you remember the first time you stepped into a creek and didn't care about your socks or your shoes or what your mom would say? That slow, sticky squelch that somehow always made everyone laugh. The water wasn't deep, just a few inches in most places, but it flowed with purpose, weaving around rocks and roots like it had somewhere important to be. The banks were lined with clumps of wild grass, and the edge was dotted with old soda cans, lost toys, and what looked like the rusted skeleton of a shopping cart. To anyone else, it might have looked like a mess. To us, it was a playground, or more accurately, a battlefield. Wes spotted the puddle first. It wasn't even a real puddle, more like a wide pit where water had pooled beneath the shadow of a slanted tree. The mud there was dark, thick, and alive. He stepped in cautiously at first, testing the edge with the tip of his Converse. Then, with a grin that could only mean trouble, he sank in up to his ankles, turned around, and flung the first handful. It hit Tyler right in the stomach, and just like that, the war began. We didn't divide into teams. There were no rules, no strategy, just the urgent need to coat each other in as much mud as humanly possible. Mud hit arms, backs, legs, necks. We ducked behind rocks, slid through the shallow water, and used fallen branches as shields. Tyler took cover behind the stump we once used as a pirate lookout, and I launched a perfect clump right over the top. It smacked the side of his head and stuck there, slowly dripping down his temple. His face, when he looked up, was pure joy. Wes tried to sneak up behind me, crawling through the reeds like some kind of soldier on a stealth mission, but I caught his reflection in the water and spun around just in time. He slipped, hit the mud, face first, and emerged laughing, his hair plastered to his forehead. For a second, we all froze from laughing so hard, shoulders shaking. Start and launched himself like a cannonball right into the center of the pit. Mud exploded around him, splattering all of us from head to toe. When he stood up, he was unrecognizable, a creature made entirely of earth, grinning wide through a face mask of filth. He raised both hands in the air and shouted, "Victory!" We fell over ourselves laughing, admitting defeat, not because we wanted to, but because there was no topping that. Do you remember how the dirtiest kid was always the winner? How it wasn't about avoiding the mess, but earning it. We measured success by stains, by how much grit was between our fingers, by how impossible it would be to explain it all when we got home. After the final round, we collapsed in the shallows, letting the cool water rinse the worst of it from our skin. Our laughter faded into quiet chuckles, replaced by the rhythmic sound of water flowing around us. Tiny fish darted between our legs, and the mud settled slowly beneath us, again painting the sky in that soft, golden hue that only showed up when time didn't matter. We didn't say much. Words weren't necessary. Our bodies spoke in sighs and lazy stretches, our eyes closed but alert to every bird song and rustle. That was the thing about those days, carving something into it with a rock. He wrote our initials, WTJ, and planted it in the mud like a flag. Tyler saluted. One clapped slowly. It was official. The war zone was ours. On the way back, we walked instead of riding to Messy, and heavy for our bikes. The mud had dried in patches on our shirts and forearms, cracking as we moved. Wes's shoes made squish sounds with every step. Tyler had lost a sock entirely. Not just happy, satisfied. We had lived that day fully. We had claimed something wild. We had made a memory so rich, so thick with detail, that even now, decades later, I can still feel the creek water cooling my sunburnt legs. I can still taste the dirt on my tongue and feel the ache in my belly from laughing too hard. I can still see the exact moment Tyler rose from the mud and declared himself champion of the creek. And somewhere, I think that muddy battlefield still exists. Knew what it meant to get messy on purpose, to turn a patch of earth into a stage, a war zone, a moment you'd never forget. It's funny how your body used to tell the story of your day before you even opened your mouth. You could come home with a streak of dried blood down your shin, a hole in your jeans the size of your fist, and dirt so deep in your palm lines. It looked like you had never washed your hands in your life, and none of it felt like a problem. Not back then. Back then, those marks were trophies, badges of honor, silent proof that the day had been lived, not just passed. The morning after the mud war at the creek, my knees were stiff. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at my scraped shin and trying to figure out when it had happened. I couldn't remember, but the scrape, now edged in red and brown, told me I had pushed hard, played hard, earned something. I pulled on my favorite jeans, the ones with the grass stains at the knees and the faint scent of sun still clinging to the denim they had. Small rip near the right pocket already, a tear I'd gotten hopping a fence behind the corner store the week before. Not on purpose, but when I jumped down from Wes's porch railing, the seam caught on a loose nail and tore with a loud rear rip. I looked down at it, laughed, and kept walking. Wes and Tyler didn't even blink. We were used to it and bandaged fingers to start a museum of forgotten summers. And not one of those injuries came from recklessness. They came from living. They were just part of it. Do you remember the thrill of realizing you were bleeding and having no idea when it happened? Do you remember the pride of showing your friends like it meant something because it did? That day, we decided to head back to the lot, behind the old church where the dirt was dry and cracked and perfect for bike races. It wasn't a park. It wasn't anything official. Just an open patch of land with a couple of ramps made from bricks and plywood we'd salvaged weeks ago. Tyler had found a busted-up no parking sign nearby and turned it into our starting line. The place was unofficial, scrappy, and ours. I was the first to go, pedaling hard, standing up on my pedals as I hit the ramp. The front wheel lifted beautifully, the back one. I sat up immediately, half laughing, half stunned. There was a sharp sting on my thigh, and when I looked down, the tear in my jeans had grown. My skin underneath was scraped raw, a pink line already turning rusty with dust. Dude, Wes shouted. That was awesome. And it was, because I got back up, grabbed my handlebars, and walked it off with a grin. Tyler gave me a high five so hard it stung. In that moment, I didn't feel hurt. I felt proud. Later, when we stopped, For sodas at the corner store, the clerk looked at us and shook his head. "You boys been rolling in gravel again?" We just shrugged, our clothes streaked with dirt, our arms dotted with bruises and nicks. He handed us a handful of napkins without asking, and we used them to wipe the worst of it off our faces, knowing full well we'd be just as filthy again before the sun went down. On the way back, we spotted a tree we hadn't climbed in a while, a big oak with a low-hanging branch that dared you to reach it. Wes went first, swinging himself up like a gymnast. I followed, my sore legs groaning a little as I climbed higher. The bark scraped against the inside of my forearm, leaving a raw line that burned in the breeze. I winced, then smiled. Another metal dot. We sat up there for a while, passing a melted pack of peanut butter crackers and sipping from a shared bottle of orange soda. The wind rustled the leaves, and for a second it felt like the world paused. No traffic, no lawnmowers, no voices, just us and the hum of everything that made childhood feel infinite. "Think we'll ever stop doing this?" Tyler asked, leaning back on a thick branch, his shoelaces hanging loose. "Nope," I said, and meant it. Not ever, but of course we did. Not right then, not that summer, but eventually. Our jeans got replaced by cleaner clothes, more serious shoes. We learned to hesitate, but not then. Then we played until the sun turned everything gold. We climbed until our fingers ached and our arms were red with rope burns and branch bites. Grime. It all meant something. It meant the day had been real. When I got back that evening, my mom took one look at me and said, "Let me guess, new rip." I looked down. Sure enough, my jeans had split clean across the knee, a perfect little window to the Band-Aid I didn't even remember putting on earlier that week. "Yeah," I said, "best one yet." She smiled and told me to throw them in the wash, but I didn't, not right away. I folded them up, still dirty, and left them by my bed, because I wanted to keep the day with me a little longer. I wanted to wake up and see that dirt, that tear, that proof of joy. There was always a moment, right around the time the shadows grew long and golden across the sidewalk, when you knew the day was ending. Not because someone told you, not because you were looking at a watch, none of us wore one anyway, but because the air shifted. The cicadas started to sing louder, and the sun hit your shoulders at a different angle. Matter how wild the day had been, whether we'd conquered a mud pit, survived a sprinkler ambush, or climbed every tree within 5 blocks, we always walked home slow, like champions returning from battle, the one where your shirt clung to your back, your shoes squished with every step, and you could feel dry grass stuck somewhere behind your ear but didn't bother pulling it out, the one where your face was tight with a layer of dried sweat and dust, your cheeks sun-kissed and scratched from branches you didn't even notice while running. That walk said it all. You didn't need to explain where you'd been. Through the backlots, past the chain-link fences with holes we could squeeze through, under the power lines humming softly above. We didn't talk much, not because we had nothing to say, but because everything had already been said through the mud on our pants, the grass in our hair, the bruises on our knees. We didn't need words, just the sound of our shoes scraping, the sidewalk, the buzz of summer bugs, and the occasional thump of a backpack swinging against someone's side. Tyler had a streak of dirt running across his cheek, probably from when we wrestled near the creek and he face-planted into a pile of leaves. Wes had a bit of bark stuck in the curls of his hair, and his left sock was missing entirely, though no one bothered to ask why. Me. I had a smear of dried blood down my shin, a band-aid peeled halfway off, and my bangs clumped together with sweat and dust. I must have looked like I'd rolled down a hill of thorns and then decided to take a nap in someone's garden. But I didn't care. None of us did, because the way we looked wasn't something to hide. It was something to wear, like a uniform, or, better yet, a badge. The world could look at us and know exactly what kind of day we'd had. There was a quiet sort of pride in it, too, in the way we walked together, slow and tired, like old men returning from war. We didn't boast. We didn't need to. The dirt spoke for itself. At one point, Tyler picked a blade of grass from behind my ear and held it up. "You growing weeds." Now, I snorted, took it from his hand, and tucked it behind his own. "Looks better on you." We laughed, not the loud, chaotic laughter of earlier, but the soft, lingering kind. The kind that stayed in your chest even after it was over. By the time we reached the edge of our block, the streetlights had started to flicker on, that faint orange glow that made everything look softer, more dreamlike, like a memory you were already starting to hold on to, even as you lived it. We slowed even more. None of us wanted to be the first to turn off, to go behind the gate, or up the steps, or through the front door where the night and the spell would end. Wes broke the silence first. "Same time tomorrow." Always that same question, then grinned. I was the last to peel off, turning down the short walkway to my house. I could see my mom through the kitchen window, stirring something on the stove, the TV murmuring low in the background. The porch light had been left on a beacon that said, "Your day is done." My nails lined with the tiny fossils of whatever I'd picked up throughout the day. My knees were dusty and bruised, the edges of my shirt stretched and uneven. My shoelaces had come untied, and I had a fresh rip near my back pocket. A piece of wildflower, probably from that game of tag through the vacant lot, was still tangled in my sock. I couldn't stop smiling, because somehow, despite how messy and ridiculous I looked, I felt right. Like I'd done the exact thing a kid should do that day. Like I had followed some unwritten law of childhood, to play, to get messy, to explore, to come back changed. I walked inside and didn't even make it past the hallway before my mom called out, "Oh my goodness, what happened to you?" "Just Tuesday," I answered. She sighed, then smiled, and told me to leave my shoes by the door. I peeled off my socks, dropped my backpack, and headed straight for the bathroom. The mirror showed me everything I already knew. My cheeks smudged with dirt, a faint scrape near my chin, and hair that looked like I'd combed it with a rake. I leaned in closer and smiled. "You made it," I thought. "You won today." I stepped into the shower and let the warm water carry away the evidence. The dirt circled the drain like the closing credits of a movie I didn't want to end. The mud disappeared, the grass unraveled, and my skin slowly returned to something clean, something new, but not empty. Never empty, because underneath it all I still felt the ache in my legs, the weight of the day in my chest. I think every summer day, no matter how different the adventure, ended with the same sacred ritual, the return home. And every return home, for as long as I can remember, was marked by a single sentence, a question, really, one that carried both mock concern and undeniable amusement. "What happened to you?" My mom never shouted it. It was never a real reprimand. It was a statement wrapped in a sigh and sealed with half a smile, like she already knew the answer, but enjoyed hearing my version anyway. And that evening, as I came trudging through the front door with dirt on my face, grass in my hair, and a sock mysteriously missing, she said it again, just like always. There she was in the kitchen, back to me, humming along to that same cassette she always played during dinner prep. Something soft and timeless, maybe James Taylor or Carole King. The smell of sautéed onions and warm bread filled the house. The kind of smell that said everything was okay. The kind that meant home. She turned around slowly, wooden spoon in hand, took one look at me, and tilted her head. What happened to you? I just stood there for a second, half out of breath, chest rising and falling, shirt stained with remnants of the day's war, shorts sagging from the weight of dried mud. The corner of her mouth twitched, that familiar little smirk she tried to hide when I came home looking like I'd rolled down a mountain. She didn't wait for an answer. She just pointed toward the bathroom and said, "Don't you even think about sitting on my furniture. Do you remember that balance? That perfect dance between love and rules? Between don't get the carpet dirty and thank God you're out having fun." On the way to the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked like a wild animal. My knees were streaked red and brown, my cheeks smudged with fingerprints from God knows where, and my eyelashes crusted with something I hoped was just dust. I turned slightly and noticed another rip in the back of my shirt I didn't know I had. That's when the story started to come together in my head. Not because I'd been planning to tell it, but because it demanded to be told. And my mom would want to hear every bit, not just because she cared, but because, in her own way, she missed it. I could see it in her eyes every time she watched me run off into the neighborhood, a quiet kind of longing, like she was remembering her own barefoot summers, her own scraped elbows. I stepped into the bathroom, turned on the warm water, and watched it run over my hands. Brown and red and green flowed into the sink like watercolor paint. I cupped my palms and splashed my face, wiped the grime from my brow, and laughed softly at how long it took to look like myself again. But truthfully, that mess was me, the real me, the one who came alive only after sweating through a shirt and crawling through bushes and laughing until my stomach cramped. After cleaning up the worst of it, I padded back to the kitchen barefoot. The floor tiles felt cool against my sore feet, and she'd poured a glass of that off-brand grape soda I liked so much. She always remembered the small things, the kind of details that made you feel seen, even when you hadn't said a word. She raised an eyebrow as I sat. "So, should I even ask?" I grinned. Well, Tyler tried to jump the creek again, but lost his shoe halfway, and then Wes fell out of the tree when we dared him to swing from that loose branch behind the old church. She smiled into her fork, shaking her head like I was both ridiculous and predictable. "And you?" she asked. "Did you lose your sock to a heroic cause, or just forget how to walk?" I laughed. Heroic, obviously. We both knew I probably stepped in something awful and ditched it out of desperation, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the retelling. The way we replayed the story over food and laughter, as if decoding the magic of the day would somehow let it last longer. Sometimes my dad would chime in from his recliner, where he sat reading the evening paper. In my day, he'd say with a raised brow, we didn't need socks. We ran barefoot through the whole town, yeah, and uphill, both ways, right? I'd tease. We all laughed, because that's how it went. Stories traded like currency, bruises examined like treasure, dirty clothes folded into memories. After dinner, Mom would inspect the full damage. She had a ritual, one knee to the floor, inspecting scrapes like a field medic, a dab of ointment here, a fresh bandage there. Her hands always warm, always gentle. She never asked me to be careful. She never told me to stop. She knew that trying to keep a kid clean in the middle of summer was like trying to hold back the tide, pointless, unnatural. Do you remember how moms always seemed to know when a mess meant something good? After I was cleaned up and fed, I usually wandered back to my room to lay on the bed for a few minutes before heading out to catch the last light of the day with the guys. But that night, I stayed a little longer in the kitchen. I sat there quietly, listening to the sound of dishes clinking, the radio whispering from the window ledge, and my mom humming along as she wiped down the counter. It was a sound I didn't realize I would miss someday, the peaceful rhythm of normalcy after a day of chaos, the soft landing at the end of a long, muddy leap, the place where all stories ended and began again tomorrow. She looked over her shoulder and caught me staring. "What?" she asked, with a playful frown. I shrugged. "Nothing, just thinking." "About what?" I smiled. "About how great it is that you never get mad when I come home looking like a disaster." She paused for a second, then reached over and brushed a dried leaf from behind my ear. "It's because I know you're happy, and when you're happy, I don't mind a little dirt." That was it. No lecture, no scolding, just understanding. I carry that moment with me still, the sound of her voice, the warmth in her words, the quiet permission to be exactly who I was. Messy, loud, wild, full of scraped knees and impossible ideas. There was something sacred about that shower. Not just any shower. That one, the one that came after a long summer day of running, climbing, scraping, and laughing. After your shirt was stiff with dried sweat and your legs were painted in, a patchwork of dirt, scabs, and mystery bruises. After you'd used every ounce of energy your body had stored, and still somehow found more. That end-of-day shower wasn't about getting clean. It was about releasing. It was about letting the water fall over you like a curtain closing after the final scene of a perfect play. That night, after dinner and the soft murmur of stories traded at the kitchen table, I finally slipped into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I turned the old faucet until it creaked, letting the steam slowly fill the small room. The mirror fogged up within seconds. I didn't bother wiping it. I wasn't interested in seeing myself yet, not until I had washed off the day, not until I'd stood under the water long enough to feel like I was floating. The moment the hot water hit my shoulders, I exhaled. A long, slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Like my body had been waiting all day for this, for warmth, for stillness, for something to balance the chaos of scraped knees and tree bark scratches. Do you remember how good that first minute felt? How the heat seemed to soak into your skin, relaxing every muscle, every inch of soreness you had earned. I stood there for a while, eyes closed, letting the water trace the lines of dirt down my back, over my legs, between my fingers. You could practically hear the day melting away, the grit from the creek war, the grass stains from wrestling in the tall field, the sweat from the bike races, and the tears from laughing too hard. All of it circling the drain, leaving behind only the memory. I picked up the bar of soap, the same kind we'd always used, white, smooth, and simple, with that clean, comforting smell that reminded me of fresh towels and Mom's folded laundry, the kind of smell that never changed, even when everything else did. I started with my arms, watching as the muddy streaks disappeared beneath the suds. My fingertips tingled from the scrapes along my palms, and I smiled. Proof of living. I moved to my legs next, carefully scrubbing around the scabs and tender spots, then my face, which felt raw in places where sun and dirt had fought for dominance. There was something about washing away the physical layers that made the memories shine brighter, like polishing old coins, as if to appreciate the joy that caused it. The bathroom was quiet, except for the steady rhythm of the water and the soft echoes of my thoughts. It was in that silence that I remembered the laughter from earlier, the way Tyler's voice cracked when he fell into the mud, the look on Wes's face when he managed to hop the fence without catching his jeans, the way we all collapsed at the edge of the creek, breathless, filthy, and content. The longer I stood there, the more the water became something else. Not just heat, not just comfort, but a bridge between the noise of the outside world and the quiet, sacred space of reflection. I thought about how strange it was that something so simple, so ordinary, could feel so powerful, like the water. Wasn't just cleaning me, it was sealing the day into memory, locking it safely in my mind where it would never be forgotten. I tilted my head back and let the stream hit my face. Warmth washed over my closed eyelids. I stood like that until the mirror was nothing but a ghostly blur, until my fingers pruned and my skin hummed from the heat. And still, I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to lose that feeling, that peace that only came from knowing you had lived fully and returned safely eventually. I turned the knobs, and the water quieted into stillness. I reached for the towel, the soft, thick one Mom always set out without asking, and wrapped it around myself like armor. I stepped out onto the cool tile, feeling half lighter, half taller, like the day had both drained me and lifted me up. The mirror was still fogged. I used my finger to draw a crooked, smiley face in the condensation, just like I used to when I was little. Some habits never fade. I wiped a small square clear and looked at myself, red cheeks, sleepy eyes, damp hair falling over my forehead. I smiled, not because I looked good. I didn't. I looked like I had earned the shower, and that was even better. When I left the bathroom, the house had grown quieter. The sun had completely disappeared, replaced by a blue darkness that felt gentle and calm. The kind of night that held no urgency, just stillness, a signal that things were winding down. In my room, the fan was spinning lazily, pushing warm air. Around, I pulled on a clean t-shirt, one with a faded graphic of some dinosaur show I used to love, and a pair of cotton shorts that hung a little too loose. The kind of clothes that hugged you without asking anything in return. Lying on the bed, I let the day play back in my head, not all at once, but in pieces. A flicker of a laugh, the feel of the mud squishing underfoot, the sting of the sun on my neck, the sound of Mom's voice calling out from the kitchen, the clink of ice in a glass, the soft pat of my wet feet on the tile. I didn't want to forget any of it. I didn't want to trade it for tomorrow just yet. Come not just because you were tired, but because you were fulfilled. And as I lay there, the shower still warm in my skin, I felt that fulfillment wrap around me like a blanket. I didn't need a bedtime story. The day was the story. And the water, the heat, the quiet, that was the perfect epilogue. The moment I hit the pillow, I felt it, that deep, bone-tired kind of exhaustion that only comes from a day spent fully alive. Not the kind that leaves you restless or tangled in your sheets, but the kind that makes your whole body sigh with relief. The kind that says, you did good today. Even though my limbs were heavy and my eyes felt like they were glued shut, the smile wouldn't fade. It lingered there on my lips like a secret only I knew. That smile, the one that stays just long enough to remind you that today was something special, that today you were a kid who ran wild, got dirty, and laughed until your stomach hurt. I was still dirty, of course. My hands bore faint traces of mud beneath the nails, my knees a little sore and scratched from a tumble near the creek. But all of that, the dirt, the aches, the small pains, felt like medals. Invisible badges, proving that I had lived my childhood with the kind of reckless joy only kids understand. Do you remember how easy it was to fall asleep on nights like these? How your mind was so full of adventures that it felt like you were still running, climbing, and chasing your friends, even with your eyes closed. The way the day's stories swirled behind your eyelids, like a movie playing just for you. I remember the ceiling fan spinning above, its steady hum a gentle lullaby. Outside, the neighborhood had quieted, but the soft chirping of crickets seeped through the open window, mixing with the faint glow of streetlights. The smell of fresh-cut grass and warm summer air drifted in, carrying the last whispers of the day. I thought about Tyler and Wes, their faces smeared with dirt, their shoes squelching with mud, and how, no matter how many times we got messy or fell, we always wanted to go back for more. The promise of tomorrow's adventures was already settling into the back of my mind, like an unspoken agreement between friends. Lying there, I felt safe. The house was quiet, but alive with the comfort of routine, Mom's soft footsteps in the kitchen, Dad's muffled laughter from the living room, the distant bark of a neighborhood dog. All of it made the world feel warm and unbreakable. I didn't need to think about the future or the worries grown-ups whispered about. I didn't need to solve problems or make decisions. Tonight was just about being a kid, messy, tired, and completely happy. Slowly, my breathing evened out, and the smile stayed a gentle curve on my face as I drifted deeper into sleep. Dreams took me back to that creek, to muddy battles, and sunlit hills, to climbing trees, and the cool splash of sprinkler water. That smile, the one I fell asleep with, was a promise to myself that no matter what came next, I would always carry these moments, the dirt and the laughter, the scraped knees and the joy, the pure, unfiltered happiness of a day well played. Thank you for joining me on this journey through those golden days of childhood. If you ever find yourself wondering what it was like to come home covered in dirt, happy and exhausted, I hope this story brought you back there for a little while. Remember to cherish those small moments, the ones that leave invisible marks on your heart and remind you who you really are. Good night. And until next time, From Night Stories from VHS Era.